It's time to talk NBA draft. We're here today to break down 6 prospects in the upcoming draft. Michael Bolton isn't one of them, but he's going to listen in anyway.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I just got back from the doctors, and I asked him whether I was going to be able to play the piano anymore. He said, of course you can. I said, that's weird. I couldn't before. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at LockedOnFantasyBasketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 with that $5 winning bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. So go ahead, double bang, thumb it up, subscribe, all of that great stuff. No further waiting here. We're going to get straight into it and talk draft prospects. So I'll just bring in my guest. So here he is. We bring him back for another time this season. It's, of course, the one and only Mavs draft. Richard Stayman is back with us. Rich, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be back. I know the time difference and everything is always one of my favorite parts of the draft season is figuring out, remembering how far away from Texas, Australia is with time zones.
Yeah, so it's about, 4 p.m. there for you, I think?
Yep,
so it's 7 a.m. here. So just a nice early start to the day, but that's okay. That's what time I get up most days anyway. So we're ready to go, and we're ready to talk about this NBA draft, Rich, because there's a number of prospects here that, again, the hype for this draft, as we all know, is lower than previous seasons, lower than the year before, lower than the year coming, lower than the year coming after that. But that might mean that some people are a little bit more disengaged, I guess, from the process and talking about these players. Just quickly, I'm not going to ask this to everybody, but you are the first prospect guest we're having on here. When people say this is not a good draft, this is a bad draft, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you... I don't know if that's something that you say, like, but how do you pass that information through? Because people will often push back and go, yeah, well, the last bad draft got Giannis out of it, right? People will often say that. So how do you, put that into context?
Yeah, so there's about 3 different ways to look at it. One is the simplest version of there's no franchise-changing talent at the top. There's nobody teams purposely tanked for. Like last year, we had Wembanyama. We saw that. Really, even in 2022, there was Paolo, Chet, Jabari. Mm-hmm. They were well sought after, that we knew they were worth getting. This year, there's really no difference between 2 through 10, probably even part of 1 through 10. You could really reorder it and get you could ask 5 different teams, their GMs, hey, rank these 5 to 7 players, or really 8 players, I guess, from 2 to 10, and say, or I guess 9, and say, hey, order these, and you're going to get 3 different responses or 5 different, however many you ask. The other ways to look at it really are, okay, yeah, there's no star power, but also it's just you find yourself saying no to so many more players. Like there's and then lastly, kind of like I just said, like when you pair it next to Wembanyama and Scoot, who were like some of the best 1-2 punches we've ever seen, it's kind of hard.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Is that there's a lot of things where you can look at this player and go, yeah, but he can't shoot. Yeah, but he can't defend. Yeah, but he can't pass. Yeah, but he's short. Yeah, but he's this. Yeah, but he's that. Whereas, and other players might say, yeah, look, Amen Thompson can't shoot, but he's literally the best athlete in the NBA. Like it gets offset with some of that stuff. And the way you say, yeah, there's no franchise-changing talent. Again, people will say, what about Giannis? Okay, yeah, at the top. Like when we're talking about the top of the draft, that's not there. And the way I look at it is more of a draft casual, someone who's not in it 365 days a year the way you are. Is that when I head into this draft class, I go, okay, there's not a single player in this draft that I have been hearing about for years. Like Chet Holmgren, like I watched this guy play at 15. Like Cooper Flagg, Boozer coming up, Wembanyama, these guys, Cade, these guys I saw play high school games. In this class, I don't know who these people are. Like haven't had that buzz for years and years and years and years. I guess some of that is maybe a COVID part of it as well. But again, the guys coming after, the guys coming before, all had that buzz. But I don't want to get way down that. But I just wanted to put that out there because the way that you answer that is exactly the way that I look at that in terms of the strength of a draft class. But we are just going to get into talking about a guy that at the moment, Rich, is getting a ton of buzz. And I think some opinions are pretty divided on Tidjane Salaun. He is a very... Well, is he the youngest player in this draft class?
No, but he's the youngest first-round prospect.
Okay. Who is the youngest player?
It's Ulrich. I'm going to botch the name.
Oh, yeah.
Ulrich Chomsky. He's 1 day before the deadline to be in the draft. The limit.
The guy from the NBA Africa Academy. Yep. All right. So we're talking about Tidjane Salaun here, who just had he's playing over in France at the moment. He's not yet 19, 6'9" forward. Those stats that the guys can see, you can't see, Rich, because I'm having technical difficulties here, but that's his per 40 pace-adjusted stats, 17 and 7 with 1.9 steals. He played 23 minutes tonight. These aren't fully updated because there were games still going on in Europe as we speak. 21 usage, 53% three-point attempt rate. And someone asked me, Josh, why don't you put the actual three-point percentage out there? Now, I don't know how you evaluate guys, Rich, but often three-point attempt rate, free throw percentage, free throw attempt rate are usually a better indicator of a player's shooting upside versus what did they shoot from three in this particular season. So that's why I don't put those numbers up there. But let's talk about Salaun, who's, again, this big body forward. And I'm going to throw things out for the casual draft person as well, because people will say, oh, young guy, 18, no one's heard of him, in France, defensive stats, is this the new Bilal Coulibaly? Like, we're like obviously a little bit different in size, but that's where your mind will go. Oh, the mystery man, the 18-year-old from France. Where is Salaun sort of sitting in that landscape? Is there merit to that, or is that just silly?
Yeah, I think a lot of the way he gets propped up has to do with just there's no other high upside gambles for I don't think with somebody his upside. Some of the guys who have that higher upside, they're a little bit older. They have they're playing in a lesser competition and did worse. Like you said, those numbers aren't bad. The big thing with Salaun is just he is extremely raw. The talent is all there. The motor is there. The drive to get better is 100% there, but his isolation defense is bad, just outright terrible. If you're curious, you can just type in Mavs draft Salaun or Salaun, Salaun, and you'll see I posted a clip of 7 one-on-one plays, and every single one of them is almost worse than the last. It's really tough. And then the jump shot, while it has improved a lot, it's still far away. Yeah,
I'm not convinced here. There is just not to say these guys are the same, but we do tend to get excited. Oh, look how long he is. Look at the wingspan. Look at the shooting upside. Look at the potential. Look at the defensive disruptability numbers, maybe. But you can go back into every draft and find that guy who just doesn't hit. Sekou Doumbouya, okay, similar size player, similar position. Maybe he shoots. Who knows? Who knows where any of this stuff goes? So. Yeah, Salaun is going late lottery in a lot of spots. You hear the buzz coming up a little bit. The reason I brought up Bilal is at this time last year, no one was really talking about Coulibaly as a top 20 player, basically. And then we started to get, teams are enamored. Interesting guy. Maybe he's moving into the lottery. He's definitely going in the top 10. And they just kept going and going and going. And then we heard a report, I think 2 days ago, similar about Salaun, saying, teams are very interested in him, a late riser, pushing forward. But yeah, I'm not convinced. It sounds like you aren't convinced about where we are go. But again, when we talk about someone that's as young as what Tidjane is, there's always going to be a level of intrigue of where does it grow. But I think I'm on the side of you that, let's also put it this way, tying back to the first part, is the common question will be, well, he could go in the lottery, but what does lottery mean in a draft that's not as strong as this one? So, is the 8th pick in this draft equivalent to a 15th pick? Do you look at past drafts in tiers and go, well, I don't have anyone in my top 2 tiers as a general rule who's in this draft? How does that sort of equate?
Unofficially, yes. I don't have that marked out. There'd be no, for what was Victor's tier, which is just that one of one that doesn't come around often. Most drafts don't have that. I would say the next one where you get I thought Scoot would be a lot better as a rookie. It's still too early to say if he's going to be good or bad. I think that's a whole different subject, but he was on a tier of his own for me next. And I would say there's nobody on those two. And in knowing what we know now, Brandon Miller would probably be pushed up too into that Scoot one. And because of that, I mean, just looking at, there's no real top, the top pick this year doesn't even flirt with the top three last year, maybe even of that true lottery, those four. But the way I look at it, it's like, okay, if you had the 8th pick this year, you're probably talking about one of the final 2 picks of the lottery last year. So it's noticeably worse.
Yep, I think that's basically exactly how I've been evaluating that as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you the shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. You can bet on spreads and money lines and player props and futures. Whatever it is, you can do that over at FanDuel, but you got to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and then you can make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, so Salaün does have a shot to go into the lottery, but like this draft is so weird that there's going to be a bunch of different players who could have that claim to fame, or I'm not even sure if it's fame at this point with how things are going. Let's go on to the next player we're going to talk about. We're going to go to Ryan Dunn from Virginia, a guy who, when I put the numbers up on the screen, if people haven't seen them, they're going to be looking at these and going, that is pretty mind-blowing. Some of these defensive stats are actually out of control. Why isn't this sort of a player going high? He's 21 years of age. He's 6'7". He averaged 3.7 blocks per 40, 2.1 steals. Low usage player, 17%. Doesn't take many threes. But defensively, as a 6'7" forward, like blocking shots like he's a center, providing perimeter chaos is huge. And yeah, people love that sort of stuff in the college setting as well. He puts up these huge performances. In general, he's getting mocked in the second round. He can't really shoot at all. I'll throw out again the lazy man, which is me, the casual fan player comp. It's in terms of the shape of defensive stats, size a little bit different. Matisse Thybulle's got a role in the NBA as this guy who came out of college with incredible perimeter block stats, unbelievable steal numbers, couldn't shoot at all. Where do we differ here?
Yeah, this one. So Ryan Dunn remains one of my hardest scouts. Even this year on a team where he probably could have played a lot more, Thybulle only played 23 minutes. And really the best year to point to is in 2022 when the Sixers played him 25 minutes a game. But there's differences. Yes, both of them had shooting issues. Matisse Thybulle's shot worlds better. And on top of that, he also was a much better playmaker. At this point, Ryan Dunn is a finisher at the rim on offense, and that is it. His shot is really, really far away. I saw him at the Combine in person last week, and there's no consistency on it, on his jump shot. There's really not that much touch. I really think you have to be comfortable playing him as like a 6'7", 6'8" center and a 1-5 defensively. And I just don't know if you really can get away with that. Like, yes, he is athletic and he will cut, but he's not going to win that much at the rim if he's going to be the center. Like, he's so much harder to fit into a lineup than Thybulle is.
Yeah. Because Thybulle's sort of, I guess, a willing shooter from three. Doesn't always go in, but he has shown the ability to take them and had some improvement in that area. But like, Dunn's not taking many of them. He's just not doing, as my screen just goes really, really slow, he's just not doing enough, I guess, from an offensive perspective. So it is hard for me and as for you to see where it works, because those defensive numbers are absolutely eye-popping, and seeing those, it's the question I have, I guess, with Dunn, and we can translate this to a lot of prospects, because when you have a draft that is considered weaker like this one, you often see a lot of these older type prospects get pushed a little bit higher. And my theory on it often is, and people go, well, sometimes you can't just go the younger guy. You've got to take the older player, their experience, and they can do it. But my thing is, if they were actually that good, they just would have come out earlier. And is it the reason that you're considering them now is because the crop of players that they're going up against is considerably weaker in other years, and they are using experience and physical maturity to create that advantage that makes them look better? Is that, like, how do you view these? Because there's a lot of, like, sophomores or juniors or 22-year-olds and 23-year-olds that might go in the top 10, which has a really, like, especially seniors and juniors, has a pretty poor record of working out. So how do you view that sort of thing as a general concept, and how does that apply to Ryan Dunn?
Yeah, I think in general, age matters a lot. The difference for a lot of teams between 21 and 22 is massive. For me, it's the experience. I don't know. Ryan Dunn, I think regardless of his age, I think he's going to be somebody that his leash is going to be short because that jumper, not because of anything with age. He'll get more chances because he's only a sophomore. But I think in general, it just comes down to the chances. Like, if your margin for error gets thinner and thinner the older you get. Once you cross 21, things get harder.
I agree. And there's always easy ways to pick out, well, what about this guy? What about CJ McCollum going in the top 10? I go, yeah, but what about every other player that went in that area? And you are rife with that. And this is going to lead me into a Dalton Connect discussion at some point with another guest, is that when you're that age, I expect you to be dominating these 19, 18-year-old kids. And my thing is, yes, late bloomers do exist, but as a general rule, like, these other guys have still got 4 years to catch up to where you are. Not necessarily 4 we're done, but it does lead to some interesting discussions, I guess, about the valuation of age and reducing the focus on current production. But we'll get to that another point, because we've got another prospect to talk about. It is another guy who's a little bit older. It is PJ Hall from Clemson. PJ is, I'm not really sure how to fully describe PJ. He's 6'10". He's, again, a little bit older, 22 years of age, but a guy that averaged almost 26 points per 40 minutes. He had a 32% usage. He took his threes. He was efficient. He hit free throws. He blocked 2 shots per 40 as well. But on surface level, looking at this, and I'll give you, again, the casual, I look at this and I go, is this David Lee that shoots threes? Like, that's where I look, when I look at the body shape and the stats, I go, is that what this is? I'm not necessarily saying that it is, but that's the initial thing that I look at. But also, these sort of guys who come in, 32 usage as a power forward / center shooting these threes, like, that's just not a realistic thing, I don't think, for someone like this to be able to do in the NBA. So what does he do that doesn't involve him being the centerpiece of an offense?
Yeah, I mean, he's a very good shooter, and he's got size. He measured at 6'8" without shoes, 7'1.5" wingspan. So he's got the long arms, and he tested pretty athletically well in the combine. And also, he injured his knee 2 years ago. He finally looks fully healthy, which I think plays a hand in why he looked so athletic at the combine relative to his performances last year. He's probably a shooter. The big risk with him, though, is the scouts I've talked to just really do not like his defense. And that's going to be where it's, does he ever touch a basketball court, like a pro basketball court in the NBA? Because is his defense that much of a liability? So that's like the big worry for a lot of scouts. The awareness issues for me are alarming. He just doesn't know what's going on around him all the time. But if he was just able to play offense and you were able to minimize his defensive shortcomings, I think you're really looking at somebody who could contribute off the bench. Yeah,
that's where we're at. Like, this is probably an early second round sort of a player that there is a skill there is a shooting skill, there is an ability, there is the size, as you mentioned, and the recovery from the injury is important. But as we talk about with so many guys, I think we see this as we get into the playoffs that they're going on at the moment, is that when, if your deficiencies are pronounced, then it just becomes that there's no real room for you to play. And that's even the case for guys who might have been big minute starters, Josh Giddey, for example, and said, now you can't play because of these deficiencies that really get honed in on. And that's great that you can have a big usage role playing for Clemson and shoot, but like when we get down to it, what are the little things that you can do that can help a rotation for a team that's looking to be good? And I'm not really sure what that is. Can he turn into a low volume spot up guy but holds his own? I don't know. The size is good. But again, we're in that position where you've got to have a little bit more than being able to do that. And that's one of my archetypes, Rich. I don't know if you have these specific sort of archetypes. One of my archetypes of players where I look at them and go, from what they've done in college and say, okay, you have this huge usage, you run this college team, but that's never going to happen in the NBA. So what the hell else do you do? And my examples that have been like a Johnny Davis or even a Jalen Wilson last season. So all this stuff is going through you, but like, what happens when you're not the best player and you're the 7th best player? And I worry a little bit looking at those numbers with PJ.
Yeah, and that's my thing. There's several guys in this class. Like I don't think he's on the slate, but Dylan Jones, for example. It's how do you scale down those kind of guys? I have the same thing. Like the stars, you have to be able to find a low usage game for them and see how they play. Because a lot of them, that's the tell. It's that simple, and we just miss it.
I like to bring up Dylan Jones because I haven't dug into him this year, but I did a lot on him last season. I know he's on the slate, just quickly on him. Is there a chance, because from memory, he is a really good rebounder. Could he, if he was able to scale some of that usage back and not be the guy who does everything at Weber State, is that that rebounding as a wing guard, is there a Josh Hartness to that?
A bit. Fun fact, he's the only player, depending on how big you are into advanced stats, you're neither think this is stupid or really cool. He is the only player as long as Bart Torvik tracks this stuff, dating back to, I think, 2008. He is the only player at the least in the last 16 years to get 30% rebounds on the defensive end and then also 30% assist rate. So that combination, 1 of 1. The thing is, he is not very athletic, but his motor is there. He has very strong hands. Does that translate? And also, can he make that work without a jump shot? Because right now the shot is pretty bad. And even in the combine scrimmages last week, he really struggled to score. And while he did other things like rebound, it just didn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
He's one of those guys that I thought should have come out last year, in the fact that he didn't, and then didn't jump his stock up. To me, he's just a gigantic red flag. But we're not going to talk we're not going to talk anymore about Dylan Jones here in this show, because I've got to also tell you that today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and the most exciting way as well to get in on the action while watching your favorite sports and favorite players. You just pick more than or less than between 2 to 6 individual player stats, bang them into a lineup, and there you go. You got your entry sorted. You can do that in the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, the Major League Baseball season. I'm sure there's other things starting. Major League Soccer, I'm sure, is coming up. Disc golf season must be ready to kick off into full gear, and all that is going to happen over at Prize Picks. You can also win up to 100 times your money now as well with as little as 4 correct picks. $10 up to $1,000 if you get those 4 picks correct. So go and download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app. The app is Prize Picks, of course, and the code is LOCKEDONNBA, and you get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It is that easy. All right, Rich, we've done those guys, which is what we needed to do. Let's talk about the next guy, and that is Trevon Brazil from Arkansas. I'm assuming I pronounced that correctly, because obviously look at Brazil. It's just Brazil, isn't it?
You got it right.
Yeah,
you got it right.
I thought I did, but I haven't been sitting and watching these guys play 100 games like other people have. So I just got to make sure I get them correct. I'm definitely going to get that Rich Chomchi wrong. I'm sure that's not even correct how to say that one. But let's talk about Trevon, who you'll be shocked to know is another forward who's a little bit older, not as old as PJ Hall, but 21 years of age, 6'11". That incredibly low usage is a little worrying. 17% usage, almost 13 points, 13 only per 40 minutes. 9 rebounds, 1.8 blocks in that time frame. He did take threes at a good rate, 42% there, but one of the lowest assist-to-turnover ratios I think I've ever seen, 0.31. Free throws are not bad, so I'll start with that. 3-point attempt rate, pretty good. Got to the line, not bad. Hit his free throws, okay. Is there shooting upside in this 6'11" forward who just doesn't touch the ball that much?
I think he's another one of these guys that the frame hurts him, where he has humongous hands. He had some of the biggest hands of the NBA draft combine, really long arms, and I think he just doesn't know how to shoot. And I also just don't know if there's touch. Just in general, disregarding that stuff, that is the big worry. And then, like you said, the assist to turnover is brutal. I
don't think I've seen a number that low in a prospect like almost forever.
Yeah, that's my red flag. I don't think he played well at the combine. Then I don't think his feel for the game is great, and I've always thought the combine's a test of that. And then you add the assist to turnover ratio. It's probably the best stat to capture that. It's just not a lot. I don't think there's a ton there.
In terms of looking at this play, I'm trying to maybe this is the thing I'm going to adopt for this draft season is the casual man's lazy draft comp. So I look at this guy, 6'11", shooting some threes, blocking some shots. For some reason my brain goes back to Terrence Jones. I don't know. I'm trying. There's probably a more modern equivalent, but yeah, that's a guy that like often you'd see on the court and go, what is this guy doing? Like, what's he actually doing out here? But then would come out with a crazy defensive play or would knock down a few threes in a row. Yeah, how far off is that in terms of Brazil's style of play?
Yeah, he's an interesting player because he's not really a shooter. It's funny, too, because a lot of defenders will fall for his up fake on the perimeter. And from there, he just blows by guys. Like, he's extremely athletic. If you remember last year, Jalen Salaün, for example, they're very similar players. But Salaün, I think, is a lot more polished and just better. Brazil is a little bit more of a poor man's version of him. And that's where I'm out. And also, there's an injury history, too. He had I think he tore his ACL in 2022. Yeah, he only played 9 games. I worry about that combination when your entire game is athleticism.
Let's do another lazy comp. Then you want to talk athleticism and guys from last year's draft, a guy that went to the same school. I hope I got this right, remembering this right. Ricky Council, like obviously very athletic player, like sort of similar. Council's obviously a bit smaller playing on the wing, but a guy that was able to have this huge athleticism with some shooting concerns. Like, what are we talking in terms of Brazil's athleticism there? Is it that level from Ricky?
It's different because he's several inches taller, but
yeah,
they're not that far off. I mean, Brazil is somebody who I think if he didn't tear his ACL last year, because he's not 100%. It doesn't happen like, yeah, you can play through it, but it doesn't mean you're the same version of yourself. I think we'd be talking about top 3 athlete in this class. Otherwise, when healthy, he is that. So for whatever that's worth, it's just I think he's not consistently there.
Next guy we're going to talk about, we're going to go to Jaylen Bridges out of Baylor. A guy that I know from being in the draft last season, pulling out, reading a lot of draft analysts' comments, and he seems to be a favorite of quite a few people, Rich. A lot of people seem to really love what Jalen Bridges brings, but you're going to be shocked to hear this, everybody. He's a 23-year-old who went back to school to come out into a weaker draft class. He is a guy that, again, I was sort of getting a little bit into last season, but only 18% usage, 32 minutes, 16 points per 40 minutes. I look at these, a 57% three-point attempt rate, like the 50%, that's good. Got to the line okay, solid enough assist-to-turnover ratio, but one thing we don't need is more Jaylens in the NBA, but he also just seems to blend in with a bunch of other Jaylens. As I immediately, again, the lazy comparison, the way a lazy brain works is, okay, well, Jalen Wilson was an older player on the wing who played as a upperclassman and had national sort of recognition. Like Jalen Bridges, where does he sort of fit in that 6'8" forward, but obviously much lower usage than Jalen Wilson? Like what's his thing? What's the thing that Jalen Bridges brings? What is it that people get excited about?
Yeah, he's an elite shooter. His shot it's weird because he shoots almost like a big. It's just a set shot, but it's impossible to block. And you look at just his archetype, guys who are 6'8", give or take an inch, but also, they're not skinny, but 210 plus. There's not many of those guys in the league. That is one of the most desired archetypes where you can shoot with that size. Those guys tend to stick. Whenever they make the league, barring injury, those are the guys who really stick. I actually have Jalen Bridges' first-round grade really safely because he has such an easy role, and he doesn't even need to be good at defense. Like, it was a little bit of an issue at Baylor. He doesn't need to be he doesn't need to be a defender, and because of that, I think his shooting is just going to take off, and he's going to make an offense so much better right away.
So let's do the red flag then. Why didn't he come out last year? Why is he doing it? And he's 23. He's beating up on kids. Like, I can beat up kids too. Like, why is he coming out now?
Yeah, I think it's simply because of the draft class last year. I mean, his stats were good enough to warrant the same type of attention. They didn't really change that much. He scored more points on more shots and less efficiency. But at the same time, he was going to say he gets the 25th pick this year. Yep. That's probably a second round pick last year. He wanted the guaranteed money. Like at the end of the day, he boosted his stock. So I think that's it.
Yep. That's fair enough. Like having that guarantee moving forward, getting college NIL money as well to supplement some of that difference between being in or out 1 year. It's just, I do always have that. I think if you're 22 or 23, I want you to be pushing to be a top 12 prospect based on skills alone versus projectability and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not really, maybe you think different. Maybe you think that, he is that guy, but obviously we're 4 years behind a lot of other prospects coming through. But the shooting is interesting. The size is okay. So he's 6'8". So I think of other sort of lower usage, say 3-and-D type wings. Not that he's necessarily got the D, but like the name again that will come to my head in this one is like a Dorian Finney-Smith, who worked himself into being a very good shooter, but a low usage guy, sort of a glue player. Now this is a different level of shooter, but I would also think, again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rich, if you're this level of elite shooter, why aren't you taking any shots in college? Why is the team not giving you the ball to shoot if you're just going to knock them all down?
Well, so two things. One, they really prioritized the development of Jacoby Walter, star freshman prospect for them, who really underwhelmed and took a lot of his shots away. And then also their guards were not point guards. They were scoring guards who could pass, but their main interest was getting themselves their looks. So I think that's a big part of it. Just watching several games, you'll see so many different times his guards will go up against 2-3 bigs. For an easy NBA guard makes this corner pass, and Jaylen Bridges has his hands up just begging for the ball, and there's nothing. So I think it really has to do with the system there.
So he had to deal with that 2 years in a row because he had Keontae George doing the same thing the year before.
Yeah, correct.
That's unlucky for him.
Yeah.
All right, final player that we're going to talk about. We're going to stay in Texas, and we're going to go to Houston, and we're going to talk about Jamal Shead. 22 years of age, 6'2", maybe a little bit generous in terms of height as a point guard. We already saw a small point guard out of Houston go in the first round last season with Marcus Sasser, which, by the way, all rookie team voting came out. Someone put Marcus Sasser on the second team, and it's like, okay, like I'm not really sure what we're doing with some of those votes, but that's okay. Jamal Shead played 31 minutes a night. He averaged almost 9 assists per 40 minutes. So we haven't seen, out of the guys that I have chosen for us to, or you or me have chosen to talk about, we haven't seen anyone who's that level of a passing talent coming through. 32% 3-point rate, 25 usage. His free throws well. The 3 steals per 40 is good. So I'll ask you this basic question. Jamal Shead, is the calling card going to be passing as a small guard, or is it going to be defense as a small guard?
Defense. That man is. I was watching at the combine the lateral quickness drill, which I think it's called the agility. It's like the lane agility. I always forget the name of it. But you know what it is. You backpedal, you sidestep, you sprint, and that's the transition. I have never. If he barely touched the cone and they disqualified it, it would have been the fastest attempt I've ever seen. Like, granted, I've seen 2 years worth, so it's not exactly like I've seen every year up close, but it was ridiculous. His defense, his ability to stay in front of everybody was also apparent at the scrimmage. We've seen it for years at Houston, and he does pass very well. I think he has a chance to be the best guard defender in the draft. The problem is, though, he can't shoot.
Okay. Well, that is a problem, isn't it? So again, I'm gonna be the stand-in for the dumb person, the casual person, the person coming in late, because I am. But we saw it. We saw Marcus Sasser be this tenacious small guard coming from Houston last season. Wouldn't say his defense held up particularly well in the NBA. Didn't know his shooting didn't hold up either. That might change in the future. So in terms of Shead being that next guy that is the smaller point guard after Sasser has left, they were playing together last season, obviously. But where does his defense rank compared to that, or compared to another guard who came in as the defense being his calling card in, whenever it was 5 years ago, like a Javon Carter coming out of West Virginia? Where does Shead sit as that sort of tenacious on-ball defender?
Yeah, so that the comps to Javon Carter are tough because Javon was a really good shooter, and his way he impacted defense was more with his hands, whereas Shead wins with his feet. And they're similarly built. Jamal Shead actually measured in at 6 feet, almost flat without shoes, which is just the big thing for me. Is just we don't see this combination of, no matter how good you are on defense, there's been a lot of different guys that have come in and be really good defenders that cannot shoot, but they can pass too. The thing is, if you're not 6'3" or taller, it's every inch below 6'4", actually, you have to be that much better at everything else to really stick.
Now, I just realized I called him Shead instead of Shed, so that's my bad on that one.
Minor. It's the accent. It's not your fault.
No, it's definitely not the accent. It's just me being wrong. Okay, so that brings us to an overall overarching philosophy then. You can talk, look, he's this great defender, right? He's got some passing upside, but really good defense. That's fine. But what is any argument, Rich? We watch the NBA at the moment. We watch the playoffs. We watch the way the games are going. In what world is a 6-foot point guard ever worth it? Like, when is that? Like, okay, Mike Conley's not particularly tall. He's 6'1", maybe. Like, he's not very tall. But like, when is a point guard? You can say, oh, it's a second round pick. Who cares? And it's getting to a stage I feel that's like, I'm not even sure that's worth it. Like, you get him, he gets out there, he gets cooked, he doesn't play. Like, is there just a stage where it's just like, I'm not, unless you're hitting 6'3", I'm not bothering.
Yeah. If you look, let's just take away two very obvious, honestly, even three obvious outlier prospects who are 6 feet or taller, or shorter, that have stuck. There's Chris Paul, Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry. They are such outliers that I'm not even going to include them. The closest player I think that Shed could be, and they're very different in how they impact defense, such low-hanging fruit, but Jose Alvarado might be the next best sub 6-foot player. That's tough. And Jose Alvarado isn't exactly raking up minutes. No. So he's very popular, but he doesn't actually play that much and doesn't have as nearly big of an impact as you would think the conversation makes it out to be.
Oh, exactly. Like, there's an easy argument. You look at the Pelicans roster that at times they just don't play him because they can just get Daniels out there to get some of those minutes, and then Jordan Hawkins is out there for shooting, and then where does Jose sit? And so it's one of those guys that comes in and does a few little things, but you're always looking and go, yeah, but how do we do better? Like, how do we improve what this guy does? And those names you brought up, like, I think one of the common things, like Chris Paul obviously is Chris Paul, like, yeah, the IQ and all that's off the charts, but like VanVleet and Lowry, they're just strong as shit. Like, they're just like, look at the way they're built. Look at their body shape. And I'm not saying that Shed can't do that because he's relatively stocky as well, but they are those outlier guys. And what, Lowry was a second round pick and VanVleet was undrafted because it is such a hard thing to get through, and so many guys that are in that sort of archetype just don't make it through. So again, I would say as a default thing, I'm just probably not going to be looking at these guys unless there is just elite outlier stuff. And that, again, would lead us into another discussion on talking about maybe the 2 guards out of Kentucky who might go in the top 10. Is it worth it? Like, and I tend to lean no. Like, I just don't think it works.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. If I can name you the players this year that, like, there's no indication at the moment that Jamal Shead is going to shoot 35% from 3. There's one player this year that was 6 feet or less that shot under 35%, and it was Xavier Simpson. He played 7 games. That's it. So if Jamal Shead cannot shoot right now, there's zero indication that he even be touching NBA courts. Like, it's a bit extreme, but it's also on the table.
All right, last question before I get you out of here, Rich. But maybe there's a general consensus around that in an NBA draft, we usually look at, there's whatever level of players, there's, 10 potential all-stars or whatever. But usually we look at a draft and go, well, after pick 45, things get really dicey. We've got 45 guys who we feel confident that can have a 2-year, 3-year window as a rotation-ish sort of a player. We talk about the lack of quality or top-end quality in this draft. The other argument that gets pushed back on that is that, yeah, but it's deep. So are we still sort of extending out to that mythical, made-up 45 line of, like, after that it gets a little iffy, or are we pushing into like 35 here, where it's like, after that I'm not really sure what you do with the picks?
No, the depth isn't terrible this year. I would say it's 45. There's probably going to be somebody in that 46 to 58 range that ultimately becomes somebody who sticks. To what degree, obviously, it depends. Some guys stick for 2 years and then bounce, but I do think the depth isn't horrible. Like, that's just the nature of the game at this point. Basketball continues to get better and better development at younger and younger ages. We're seeing more and more dividends. So I don't think the depth will ever be bad in the draft again. All
right, so let me ask you this last philosophical question quickly. We know that there's expansion coming into the NBA. is there enough talent through all the different pathways now, the improvement in international basketball? We're going to see, again, this guy, he's not even been talked about, but the Ulrich Tomchi stuff coming through, like these guys coming through the African Academy, it's an additional pathway of guys coming across. Like, can we do a third round of a draft soon?
I think so. I would fully be on board with even if it's just a two-way draft round.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be big. There's so much talent. The guys who ultimately my board almost every single year, I've found myself where I'm like, okay, roughly 75 players get a draftable grade, even in some of the worst and some of the best. Some of the best, like last year, I had up to 80. Not everybody sticks, of course, but there's enough to say a team could take a gamble. Like the guys who are going 58, a lot of that didn't happen a long time ago where
Sure.
The other picks were, I feel bad for who I'm about to name, but like Colton Iverson 10 years ago was not somebody worth drafting in today's day. Like he would be completely undrafted, may not even get a draftable grade. There's several examples of those. The guys that are getting those same picks are just worlds better and worlds more advanced with much higher upside. It's just not always more achievable, partially because they just go overseas and they aren't patient or teams aren't patient enough. But if you added more ways to be patient and more ways to develop, I think it would only make it better.
I agree that we can get to that. I think I had I think I scouted like 130 guys last year and ended up whittling it down to about 77. So that was, that's I think pretty good in terms of where we hit with that 3-round opportunity, more teams than come in, and then we get to a stage with the extra 2-way spots. I do think that is coming. I think the NBA is pushing. I think that's part of the precursor to that is the 2-night draft coming up this season as well. But Rich, I've held you for long enough here, so tell people what's cracking for you over on NBA. I didn't even say that you're from Locked On NBA Big Board. People know that, I'm sure. But go, what's happening over at Locked On NBA Big Board, and what's happening with the other stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, Locked On NBA Big Board we're in our home stretch. We got a month till the draft, a little bit over a month. I do detailed scouting reports on my Substack, mavsdraft.substack.com. That's the closest I think out there to NBA level scouting reports from everything I've gathered. So check those out. A lot of those will be coming in almost daily at this point in the last month. Yeah,
had someone recommend your Substack to me this morning, actually, so I'm excited to go in and subscribe and get. You had one, so I'm going to get in there and have a crack at that. Rich, but thank you again for coming on for, I think, maybe the 4th year in a row to talk NBA draft prospects, and we'll chat soon.
Appreciate it.
So that's the end of our first NBA draft prospect show. I hope you guys enjoyed the information that Rich was bringing. You can go and check him out, as I said, over on Locked On NBA Big Board. Again, this draft is weaker. There are still interesting players, but, and I'm in some way or fashion, I'm going to bring this up with everyone we have on, is that there is this idea that like you never know if it's going to be good or bad, but you do. And there are going to be random players who surprise always, but we just need to be really cautious about passing what happened with college production, what was the context behind it, how does that make sense in the NBA? Otherwise, you're all going to end up drafting Ochai Agbaji at pick number 1. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the thumb up, do all of those little things that do help out the show, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.